Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Christine Passo. I'm a support and transformation coach for midlife women, and I'm also the host of this podcast, Unconscious Evolution. Today, I welcome a new and wonderful friend all the way from Australia, Gabriela Georges. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Christine. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So, listeners, I want to share that it is 4 p.m. my time, Eastern Standard Time here in Virginia. And it is what time in the morning for you, Gabby?
7 a.m.
7 a.m. She woke up early. Well, she works, she does all those things, but she woke up early to be here with me, with us today. So if she needs an extra sip of her coffee, let's give her a little grace. But I'm so happy to share her with you. She has been such a delight to get to know and really a gift to me. But let me share a little bit more about Gabby. Gabby Georges is a multidisciplinary artist, creative grief guide, and founder of the Grief Cocoon. Her work explores grief, loss, love, and nature, and is inspired by her beloved mother, whom she lost when she was 20 years old. Gabby's contact information and social media details are listed in the show notes. Please feel comfortable reaching out to her. Just don't expect her to get back to you on East Coast time because she's taking a nap. She's taking a long overnight nap. But Gabby, thank you again for opening your personal life to us today. What would you like to share? And has anything different come up for you, even over the last few minutes, that you didn't think you would share?
Actually, yes. I think I feel like I want to talk about this is something that's been really prominent over the last week for me, and it's giving people grace when they don't express themselves in the best way, or they might not say the right things, or they might not be in the best state of mind or the best emotional state. It's just giving people grace. I think that's been a real major thing, and receiving grace, I think. And I guess grace might be a funny word for some people because it might be, kind of connected to religion, but it's more, and I don't mean it necessarily in that sense, but it's just more, I think, around compassion, having compassion within relationships, and especially close relationships, like whether it's with a spouse or whether it's with a really good friend. I think as humans, there are times when we aren't at our best. And so we might respond in a particular way that it doesn't reflect our best intentions or doesn't reflect who we are at the core. And that may be easily kind of misinterpreted or judged in a certain way. And so one big thing for me in the past week is, I guess, asking for that compassion and also giving that compassion in a relationship. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you talk about that because we are, as a culture, as a society, as a world, we're constantly getting text messages, right? That we're reading on our phone and we're like, well, I wonder what the tone is in that, right? We are constantly questioning the communication that we're receiving from strangers, loved ones, partners, friends, whoever it is. And based on whatever it is that we might be going through at the moment, what we've gone through in the past will absolutely be the deciding factor on how we are going to read their intention. And I love that you say that you're trying and that you've been offering more grace to yourself and to others because it's really, really hard to do.
It is. Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
I think it's funny you mentioned text because I found that that is the worst form of communication when it comes to really trying to understand each other and understand people and express yourself, because you cannot share the tone that you're writing in, or that that the intention might not be clear because of such like the one-dimensional aspect of text, or you get other words. And I feel like that is really can be really problematic when you're having big discussions. And so one thing for me is asking if like I can actually meet with the person face to face to work through misunderstandings or to talk about these big things, because I find that text usually makes things worse. Even phone calls sometimes, because you still can't see the person, you can't see their body language. You really you're still behind, kind of, there's a barrier there still, because you're I think I don't know if there's research behind this, but I feel like maybe your compassion or empathy might be reduced because you're not looking at the person in front of you.
Mhm.
And seeing people's faces, I think, automatically just lowers that kind of barrier of, increases that barrier of that understanding, because you can see they're just like you, and you're really just trying your best, and they're trying their best. Uh, and so, using new forms of communication can sometimes make it worse when you're having those big discussions. And when it comes to grief, or when it comes to um, a disagreement, or when it comes to just so many different things of politics, or all sorts of things, I find that you can easily misjudge someone, or yeah, misinterpret what someone says, because you're just looking at the words and you don't have anything else to go by.
Yeah. Well, and
Mm.
something I've noticed so much of, because I used to be one of those people that I would receive a text message and I'd be like, what the heck is that? Why are they saying these things about me? Where'd they get? And like, I'd start telling all these stories in my mind, right?
Mm.
And creating a conversation, a scenario, a past event that didn't even happen, that like they didn't even intend. And I admit to that. I admit to it because I've been able to grow and keep learning from that. So, like,
Mm.
even now when I read a text, in fact, just the other day I read a text and I was like, I think this is what this text meant. And I waited and just thought and, read it over a few times. And I was like, first of all, their words don't mean what I think they mean. They mean what they think. But
Mm.
we're so quick to create a right or wrong when somebody speaks, when somebody says something. It's like, especially when you're in a deep conversation
Mm.
with a partner, a relationship,
Mhm.
it's either we feel like they're accusing us of something or that we didn't do something. And so it becomes this battle for why we're right, why they're wrong. And this, and then this, even the thought of communicating openly and clearly with acceptance is out the door.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think in the moment sometimes we are not in a place to, because we get you might get defensive, or you might feel attacked, and so in that moment you can't reach that place of compassion. you,
Right.
you can't access that place of compassion and openness, to actually be able to listen, to actively listen, and to actually try and hear the person out. So sometimes you need to sort of take a break, or revisit the conversation at another time when you're not so emotional, or you're not so defensive, because it is easy to, we all have an ego, and it's a fragile ego. It doesn't like
Yes.
feeling attacked, and it doesn't like feeling like that it's judged, or that it's pigeonholed. And so in the moment we might not be able to deal with that very well. So our natural reactions, yeah, it's about more reactions than responding. So we're kind of responding from a place of hurt, and that's what it is. I find, like,
Mhm.
it's you're feeling hurt, and the other person then feels hurt, and so when you're still just so in the place of hurt, you can't really always bridge that understanding, and focus on the other person, and to try and hear them clearly. So sometimes it's better to revisit the conversation once you've had some time to reflect. Um, I think that's what I've found. Sometimes it's not, you can't always address the how you feel or what's happening in the moment. You just
Yeah.
have that conversation, and maybe it doesn't go well, and then you can kind of go and reflect a little bit, and then come back with some insights or some more level of understanding that you can share with each other.
Yeah. It's such a good point because I mean, I'm 54. I've had my fair share of disagreements and relationships in my life. And I see it now from such a different perspective. And that's because I've gotten to that point that I'm okay looking in the mirror and saying, did what you just say come across rude, offensive, whatever? I mean, I'm okay asking myself those questions. But so many conversations that are happening with hurt feelings, we're not able to stop and really think about, is what I'm complaining about, is this really about today or is this about my past? Because 9 times out of 10, Gabby, it's about our past. It's an
Mhm.
insecurity. Like I used to be insecure about, attention. It's like, well, you're not giving me that attention, so you're not thinking about me. It's like all those stories, all those assumptions start coming up where it had nothing to do with that person. It had everything to do with me. And so with that, we create all these and set all these demands on our partners that they're never going to meet because ideally we're the ones that have to fill that void. We have to care for that wound and treat it and heal it in the best way that we can. And
Mm.
so in sharing about that, in the introduction, as you sent to me that you lost your mom when you were 20 years old. And so as we talk about this and communication and how important it is, this question may require you to think for a second, but I appreciate that in having lost your mother at such a young age, such a I mean, to lose a mother is I have not lost my mother, but it's that link to her generation. It's that link to the stories that she would tell you about her generation, her family, her culture, all the ways that she grew up. That's gone. And so for you and having lost your mom at the age of 20, how do you think that has changed the way that you communicate with others and how you allow them to communicate with you?
That's a very good question. Wow, I've never been asked that question before.
I tend to do that on this show.
Oh, yeah, I think, hmm, this does require a bit of reflection because my communication style has changed so much since I lost my mom, and but it's more a reflection of my growth as a person, I think, because when I was younger, I mean, I was just barely coming out of my teenage years. At being 20, I was still quite, I guess, immature. I was a bit, I wasn't very good at verbally expressing myself. I would just assume that people knew what I was thinking. I was a bit passive aggressive as a way of trying to communicate. Uh, and I could write great poems and songs to let you know what I was thinking, but to be able to just sit there and tell you, that was a real struggle. So
Mhm.
losing my mom, I think, really brought to the forefront what was really important in life and made me question how I wanted to live and what I wanted to do with my life. And I think that journey, I guess, led me to working with groups and working with communities and just working with lots of people in general. And I think when you work with lots of people, you need to get good at communicating clearly and having empathy and compassion for people of all walks of life because you don't know who you're going to get. And they might have a different way of looking at the world, or they might be a different age, they might come from a different country, they might have disabilities, and it's just so the range of human diversity is so big. And so I came to kind of understand people from all walks of life, and I think I started to learn to practice verbally expressing myself in a way that I'd never had before. And now I'm at the point, and sadly, actually, I found that the more I wanted to let people know what I was thinking and feeling directly, the less I felt the need to write, and the
Hmm.
less I started, the less I was writing, because I think my writing was like my home, my safe place to express myself. But once I started to be find the bravery and courage to actually tell someone directly what I was feeling and thinking about what had happened or about them, then I just didn't need to write it down,
Hmm.
because I was expressing it in another more direct way. So that has that's what's changed over the years. And I don't know if it's directly, like, it's sort of an indirect consequence of losing my mum, where relationships are really important to me. And you lose friends, when you lose someone significant, especially at that age. I had a best friend, but she didn't really understand what that would be like, and most people at that age don't understand what it's like to lose a parent. So you kind of drift apart. And then I sort of started finding making new friends. And over time, you really start to value friendships that are solid and that are deeper than the shallow good time friends, because you realize life can suck sometimes, and I need friends that I can support me, and that I can support in return. So I'm really lucky that I eventually found that. And even within my friendships, there's a lot of emphasis on, well, I'm really lucky they're very emotionally intelligent. And so I'll have a friend who we both can share things with each other, and she'll, before she, vents, or before she wants to share something, she'll say to me, "Hey, I wanted to talk about something. Do you have capacity to listen?"
Mm. Wow. Yeah,
And
that's so huge.
it is. So that level of, like, conscientiousness, I think, is so hard to find, but I really appreciate that. And so just open communication and asking questions. And like, I was thinking when you were saying, we make up stories about what someone means by their text message. And I think what would happen if, whenever that happened, we would respond by saying, "So this is what I think you mean. Is that correct?
Yeah.
This is what I'm understanding from your message. Is that right? Is that what you mean? Or am I misunderstanding it?" And that could just simply, like, you're still expressing what you're thinking, but also you're giving the other person a chance to respond with their version, the truth of what they meant.
Yeah. And it's so true. It's like, but we're in such a rush. Nobody, like, hardly any of us are stopping to take the time. Instead,
Mm,
we're going to absorb why it's bothersome to us. So I want to bring up 2 points here. And the first one was that you talked about that when your mom passed away, that you lost some friendships, and especially being at the age that you were. But I'm here to say it doesn't matter
mm,
what age you were, but um, there's a lot of people that cannot, they just can't grasp it. They're way too uncomfortable with
mm,
your grief. Um, and having patience with it. And I remember, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. When I went to college, I lived with my sorority sisters. We had a little townhouse where we lived, and right after we graduated, one of my roommates, so I had 3 other roommates, one of our roommates, her dad suddenly passed away. He had, I think, a heart attack and died. And Filipino family, very, very close. And she was devastated. I mean,
mm,
just devastated. Well, none of us in the house, except for our friend who lost her father, had known anybody that had lost a parent. And I'm, like, so ashamed to say this, but I didn't know any better at the time, and thank
mm,
goodness I do now. But our friendship with her, those of us in the house, we essentially ended up losing friendship with her because we weren't compassionate enough to realize that she was depressed. Like she was really struggling. She didn't want to come out with us. She wanted to come home from work and go to her room and maybe cry or maybe sit in the dark, right? Like instead, we're like, you're isolating from us and, we need you to be part of the house. And I think she ended up moving out. For all I remember, we asked her to leave. I don't know. I mean, it's just horrible for me to think about, that there are so many people that don't know, and those are the friendships that get lost. And so, if she was saying bad things about us at that time, she had every right to say we're insensitive. We're not showing up for her. We're not honestly giving her the love that she deserves. And I've had that in the grief that that I experienced last year. Um, because it's not our right to judge anybody in their grief. Period. I know you know all about that. So I just wanted to talk about that and own up to my own, unfortunate behavior because we're all human. I mean, luckily I've learned. But the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is you talked about how when you learned how to communicate more clearly, more openly, and share more parts of you, that you wrote less. And I love that because it's the same thing for me. I used to write when I was younger. I wrote all the time and everything was all inside of me, right? I was like this little grief cocoon of my own, right? It's like the perfect name that you came up with there. And so, what I want to ask you is that I know that part of the coaching that you offer in your own business, the Grief Cocoon, is some journaling practices. And so, what I want to ask you is so, for those of us, those people that are really suffering in their grief, that feel isolated, how do you approach the journaling thing now that you know? So, you know how important it is to journal, and you also know how important it is to share verbally. So how did you work through that in your own life? And then how do you help the people that really need to be able to communicate in that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's two different, you know, there's a purpose for journaling and there's a purpose for communicating to someone, and with journaling, I feel like that is your safe space for yourself to just purge on the page
Mhm.
and not worry about how anyone else is going to receive it, how how it might make people feel. It's a place where you can be messy and politically incorrect and just say what you want to say. You can swear, you can uh, judge people, you can do
Yeah.
whatever you want in the journal, and you can be as you can express all your pain and all your heartache. And you can also, for me, journaling is a way to communicate with my mum, for example, because I still journal when I'm feeling like I'm a little bit emotionally scattered or emotionally just emotional, and I feel like I need to process those emotions. I will go back to journaling, and so I will just journaling is the place where, yeah, I'm unfiltered. Basically, journaling is the place where you're unfiltered. When it comes to communicating openly with people, it's really hard to, if you're unfiltered, lots of things, it might not go so well,
Yeah.
and but I think the place for communicating openly, I've realized, is when someone else needs to know something, because it may be the what something they've said or done has impacted you, and you don't want them to do it again, or you want them to be aware of what's happened, or you want them to know how you feel, but just to make them aware of what's happening, what's going on. So there's a place for communication and an open communication when you're feeling like there's something that you need to bridge an understanding, or you need to connect with someone, like, or someone means a lot to you. I think also sometimes we don't need to say everything to everybody.
Mhm.
the people will judge you, and that might be strangers that you meet once. And I think, well, is it worth the energy to actually stop there and say, actually, and to actually let them know that you didn't appreciate it? Sometimes, if you have the energy, sure. If you don't, you can just let them say what they want to say and move on, because you're never going to see them again.
Right.
But I think open communication is really for those relationships, and that level of, uh, I guess, effort is for those relationships that really mean something to you, and that you want to that are you think will be there in the long term, and that you really care about, because then you really want to develop the I guess the connection. And I think relationships, the vulnerability needs to be there. And I guess it's hard because if it only comes from one person, then
Mm,
it might not be the best dynamic to actually, because I can say, yeah, speak openly and freely and be honest, but the reality is that not everybody in our social network, not everybody in our friendship group has the ability to listen with compassion and listen with empathy.
yeah.
They might hear what we say, and they might get offended and defensive. And so then you have to be prepared for that, or you have to kind of assess whether someone might do that. And you have to mentally, I feel like sometimes you have to mentally prepare for that, because
Yeah.
unfortunately not everyone is able to really be that open and hear. It might be feedback, or it might be just making them aware of something, and they might not know how to deal with it. And so that's when you have to just be selective with who you communicate with and what level of communication you want to have. But, like, if it's a family member or a really close friend or a partner, hopefully you can there is room for that. There is room for open dialogue and conversations that might be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
because there might be things that, if they're not aware of it, and if it hurts you, then they might keep doing it. And so over time that will chip away at your, I guess, just your self-esteem, or your ability to express yourself, and or your ability to trust that person. And so I think those things are really important in a relationship. You need to be able to trust somebody, and you want to be able to share your honest, or your real feelings and your thoughts with the person, and it should be mutual. So I believe, the things that affect that trust and that loyalty, or that self, if it's a confidence thing, then those are important things to address. And so that's when the verbal communication comes in. And maybe you journal first to process and to figure out what exactly you're trying to say, because sometimes, you might just be overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. So journaling can help give you clarity to then be able to know what it is that you really are trying to communicate, or what it is that you really feel. And so you can do the processing first through journaling, and then ask the person if you can have a conversation about those certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really is, what I've learned to love about journaling, writing, whatever it might be,
Hmm.
that so much sometimes what I write, I need to hear myself. It's
Yeah.
like it's a validation that nobody's going to be able to give to me but myself. And it's a way for me to read back my words and think, again, like, is my broken heart, is my anger, is my frustration, is that really about this situation? Or is it
Hmm.
something I'm attaching to my past and therefore, tacking on to the current situation, which is really
Hmm.
dangerous. I mean, this is what we do. This is life of unresolved feelings, right? Like this unresolved pain that we live with, that we carry through and we carry through.
Hmm.
And I found a lot of relief and release in writing in that manner. So I wanted to ask you, so you and I had a call several weeks ago. We caught up after I was on your podcast. You were wonderful enough to have me on your podcast, The Grief Cocoon. And we caught up and you talked about how you took some time away from social media and that you traveled quite a bit and that there were some lessons perhaps in there that you needed this time. Can you share that with us?
Oh, wow, where do I start? Yeah, so I started traveling almost a year ago in March last year, in March 2024. And it was a dream of mine to find out what it was like to live in a place other than the place I was born. And so I did. And I thought about it for years. And then I I visited this place in far north Queensland in Australia, and I fell in love with it. And I thought, I came back home and I thought, I got to find a way to get there. And so anyway, 6 months later, I was on the road. It was a road trip up the East Coast, and discovered so many beautiful places that I'd never been to. Stayed on farms. I was doing a lot of house sitting and just exploring new locations, and that was, I think, partly I bring it back to my mum telling us to enjoy life at the end of her life. That was her message to me and my sisters, because she just worked so hard up until the very end, and she never really got to enjoy the fruits of her labor. And so I thought, I know I'm not retired. Which, might be something that my mom and dad used to say, oh, we'll work hard now, and then when we retire we'll enjoy
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what if I don't get to retire? What if I
Yeah.
don't get to an older age where I have that luxury? So I decided to enjoy life now. And that's why I traveled, and I met so many lovely people along the way. And then recently, yeah, I did take some time off social media. It was getting a bit, you're kind of in a bubble on social media, and there's lots of information coming at you. And actually what prompted it was I lost reception. I was on a farm and I lost reception for 2 days.
Oh, darn. Darn it. I can't get on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I lost reception, and I just, initially I was like, oh my goodness, like I can't. How do I couldn't communicate with
Yeah.
anyone, and I couldn't see what was happening. But then I thought, well, what else can I do? Okay, maybe I'll start reading a book. Maybe maybe I'll start fixing that button on that shirt that I've not done for months. That's just been sitting there. I'll get my sewing kit out and actually start stitching that button up. And maybe I'll go outside and watch the cows, do their thing and spend time in nature. And I just felt this real surge of creativity coming back. And I thought, oh, I could write. I started, I was like journaling. I thought I could write more, because I can't really do anything on my phone. So it was just really interesting to see that process, where initially it was like, oh no, like it was a bit of a bit of anxiety. And then I just sort of accepted that I couldn't access the internet or communicate with others out on the outside outside of where I was. So then I thought, well, let me just do what I can that's offline. And it was really beautiful to be able to do that. And then when reception came back, the stress I felt was just so noticeable. And I started getting all these notifications, and I was like, I was so overwhelmed just going through notifications. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this doesn't feel very good. What's happening here? Like it's just my body is just kind of all confused and scattered, and it was just not didn't feel very good at all. And so then when I was spending time on social media again, it just felt like there was a lot of resistance physically. I just didn't feel very uh I lost the calmness that I had that I
Hmm.
had being offline. So I started to kind of, and I started noticing, I guess, how curated, you can see kind of how curated the content is, and with a lot of people, kind of, it's all showing the very best of
Mhm.
what someone's life. And I could see, like, yeah, how it's easy to compare yourself to other people, and there's a lot with social media that isn't healthy. But then again, I know, I acknowledge that, I met you through social media, and
Yep.
there's real people behind accounts, and you can really make new relationships out of it that are genuine. And so I see there's both good and bad, but for me, it's still I'm still kind of trying to figure out whether it's whether the energy and the time that you spend and sometimes waste on social media is worth the the good stuff that you get out of it when it comes to, like, connecting with people. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting thing where, yeah, I've put a lot of effort into it as well, creating content, and I know that people appreciate the content. And so part of me feels like, oh, is it selfish if I am not creating content, or I'm not putting out there stuff that will help people? Is it, yeah, so there's all these questions.
That come up.
Mm,
I know. And as an entrepreneur doing all the things, right? It's all the creation comes from you, the coaching comes from you, the business plans, the business systems, like everything comes from you. And I think that overall our entire world is struggling right now to connect on social media the way that we used to think that we did. So we
mm,
used to think that we were fulfilled with it, but we really weren't. It was like a fake high. It's kind of like drinking a sugar soda and getting this high and then coming down. We just didn't come down from it because we were stuck on a permanent high of social media and, digital life. I mean, living in this world of technology that we have
mm,
now. But this is not uncommon. I mean, overall, social media engagement is down. It's down. I mean, it is here in
mm.
the States. I don't know if it is in
Yeah,
Australia.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
So it's
Mhm,
just going down because we're isolating more and more, and we're not getting the right help, and because our communication is not as good, right? We're not clearly communicating as we were. We're in a tough spot as a world in what we need. We're in a tough spot. And there was a point in me telling you this, that I think, for at least just saying from my part in what I do on social media, because I really went through about 2 months and I'm like, I don't want to do it. Like, I feel
mm,
icky. I feel empty. I don't feel like I'm connecting. I feel like my purpose in wanting to be on social media is to connect and have conversations with people, right? Like, that is the core of what I love and what I want. And I realized, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do it in a patterned way. I'm not going to follow the rules on what LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook says to do. If I'm really feeling it and I'm feeling creative and I think that something is worth sharing, I'll do it. And I'll do
mm,
it with no expectation, right? But then I also maybe might spend a few days off. I mean, I have other business strategies in mind, as an entrepreneur, as owning our own business, we have to. But
mm,
in terms of following the rules that we were supposed to follow, created that anxiety for you, created the anxiety for me, that disconnect, because you and I, what we do, that's what we want to do. We want to be connecting with people. And when we're not,
mm,
it's really hard to show up authentically, like really as a giving, generous, no strings attached, no expectations type of thing.
mm.
Um, so as we begin to wrap up, Gabby, what would you say? So in all those travels and basically living a nomad life, which I think is so awesome, what was one of your biggest takeaways from what you experienced?
Well, one of them was that your dreams are not as hard as you think they are to realize. Because
Okay.
I know it sounds a bit, but like, I had thought about moving for years, And I was thinking, oh, I'll go to Europe, I'll go to somewhere overseas. And then the more once I visited this, I think there were signs. I think noticing the signs was really important, and responding to life rather than trying to control it,
Mm.
And in the end, I had just set a date, and I thought, you know what, by March 2024, I'm out of here. I don't know how I'm going to, like, what I'm going to do for work when I get there. I don't know if I'm going to have any friends. I'm just leaving regardless. And obviously, I had been working in Melbourne, in my hometown, and I had saved up a bit of money so that in case it didn't work out, I still could support myself while I was traveling. And so, uh, in the end, I think I just had to really make the decision to do it. And my dream, what I thought was such a huge
Mm.
dream, actually then was quite simple, because I just had to prepare for it, and I just had to set a date and a deadline. Some people work better with deadlines.
Yes.
Some people don't get anything done unless you have a deadline, and maybe I'm one of those people. So that was a big realization, that I was then started traveling, and I thought, oh, I'm doing it. Like, this is the thing I thought was so hard,
Yeah.
and I'm doing it. And why did I delay it for so long?
Yeah.
So and even if, maybe your dream is not to move or travel, but like, I think everyone can take a small step towards their dream now,
Yeah.
and even if it still might be years away, or might not be, might be months away, I think, see if there's something that you can actually do towards achieving that dream and realizing it, because it might not be as hard as you think it is.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I just learned that for me, I believe that things will work out, and trusting your curiosity, trusting yourself, and backing yourself with the
Mm.
decisions that you make, and things will eventually work out. It's hard for people, I know, because you want to know exactly what will happen. You want to know exactly what the outcome will be. But the
But none of
last
us
year,
do. I mean,
no,
like, even
no,
if you stayed on your regular path and didn't change anything, you still don't know how it's going to be. I mean,
yeah,
we think we have control over all these things, and we fight all the time to stay in control. But the reality is, we're really not. We're only in control of how we react. That is
mm,
it. That
mm,
is it. I mean, there's really nothing about life that is fully planned, even though we like to think that.
mm,
And the more that we accept that and stay open to doing what we can when we can, but then it's like, okay, well, maybe now I need to turn right instead of turn left. Same thing like with traffic. It's like, we're just not accustomed to going off trail, and it's uncomfortable. So
no,
I
and
applaud you for doing that.
yeah, and you miss out on so much when
Yep.
you stick to the plan that you think, you know, you're, I guess, making for your life, like, and you're not open to other opportunities or other possibilities. I think
Mm.
that's, I think it's important sometimes to just pay attention to things outside of the life you're currently, you currently think you're in control of.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
wonderful things might come from that. Yeah.
That's right. Actually, they will,
Mm,
because there, no matter what will be, there will be something new that happens. There will be a lesson. You will see and experience a side of yourself that you had not before, that you never would have before
exactly.
without coloring outside the lines, so to speak. Well, Gabby, thank you so much for joining me today on Unconscious Evolution. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. As you already know, Gabby's contact information is in the show notes. Gabby, thank you again. Listeners, until next time, enjoy yourself, enjoy the moment, and try to discover what your unconscious evolution is. See you next time.
Thanks, Christine.